You know, they say your life can change in a single moment. One phone call, one sentence. And for me, that sentence was, "Honey, Grandpa had a fall." I remember I was in my studio apartment in Chicago, trying to finish a graphic design project, and the rain was just tapping against my window. My dad's voice on the phone was tight, strained, but I just thought it was worry. I thought we were all on the same team. I should have known. The signs were always there. My dad, Robert, he's a salesman, and I don't just mean for his job. He sells an image, the perfect house in the suburbs of Oak Park, the perfect wife, my stepmom, Cynthia, the perfect, shiny life. And he was always so good at selling everyone on the idea that he was the self-made man. But he wasn't. The foundation of everything he had was my grandfather, Pops. Pops was this incredible, gentle giant of a man. He came to this country with nothing but a suitcase and a trade. He was a master carpenter. He could take a piece of raw wood and make it sing. He built his business, Giovanni's Fine Woodworking, from the ground up. It wasn't some massive corporation, but it was successful, solid. And he built our family home with his own two hands. Every cabinet, every floorboard, every single detail. It was all Pops. He was my sanctuary. When my mom passed away when I was 10, Pops was the one who held me. He'd let me sit in his workshop, the air thick with the smell of sawdust and varnish, and he'd tell me stories about her. He'd tell me I had her fire, her strength. My dad? He just moved on too fast. And Cynthia, she never wanted reminders of the past, especially not a grieving little girl or an old man who smelled of wood stain. So when Pops had that fall, it was the beginning of the end. I drove straight to the hospital, and seeing him there, in that sterile white bed, this man who was always so strong, so vibrant, he looked small, fragile. He had a broken hip, and the doctors said he couldn't live alone anymore. He needed full-time care. And my dad, he put on the performance of a lifetime. He was the devoted son, holding Pop's hand, talking to the doctors, and then he called a family meeting in the horrible, fluorescent-lit waiting room. He looked at me, his eyes all sincere. "Ava," he said, "we can't put him in some facility. It would kill him. His mind is still sharp as a tack. He needs to be at home." My heart swelled. I was so relieved. I thought, finally, he's doing the right thing. "Cynthia and I," he continued, "we've talked about it. We have the space. The downstairs guest room has its own bathroom. We can convert it, make it accessible for him." I remember the tears in my eyes. "Oh, Dad, that's amazing. Thank you." But then he got serious. "It's not going to be easy, Ava, or cheap. We'll need to hire round-the-clock nurses, modify the house. It's a huge financial burden." And I, like an idiot, I said, "We'll help. I'll contribute whatever I can from my freelance work." He just patted my hand. "Don't you worry about that. Pops, he has some savings, some assets. We'll use that to cover his care." It's what he'd want. It made sense. Of course, it made sense. Why wouldn't we use Pop's own money to take care of him? A week later, Pops was discharged, and we moved him into my dad's house. The downstairs room was set up. It was nice, clean, but it wasn't his home. It wasn't his workshop. I could see the light in his eyes dim a little every day. And then, my dad sat down with me and Pops. He had a sheaf of papers. "Dad," he said to Pops, his voice so gentle it was almost a whisper, "to access your funds, to make sure everything is legal and above board. The lawyers say it's best if you sign over power of attorney to me. It just makes it easier to pay your bills, manage your accounts, so you don't have to worry about a thing." Pops looked tired, confused by all the legal jargon. He trusted his son. He looked at me, and I nodded. I smiled. "It's okay, Pops. It'll make things simpler. I will never, for as long as I live, forget the sound of that pen scratching on the paper. The finality of it." That was the moment we handed my father the keys to the kingdom. For the first few months, things seemed okay. The nurses were there. The house was adapted. I visited every single day after work. I'd read to Pops. I'd show him my design projects on my laptop. He'd tell me about the wood grain in the table, how it was like a story. But then, things started to change. The first thing I noticed was the nurses. The really kind, experienced ones. They started disappearing. They were replaced by new people. Younger, less experienced. Cheaper. I asked my dad about it. Ava, it's a nightmare finding good help. We're doing the best we can. Then, Cynthia started making comments. Little Barbs, the medical supplies are so expensive. The noise from his room at night is disruptive. Ava, don't get him so worked up with your visits. He needs his rest. My visits became strained. I felt like an intruder in my own father's house. And Pops, he was fading. It wasn't just his body anymore. It was his spirit. He became quiet, withdrawn. The sparkle in his eyes was gone. One day, I found him crying, silent tears just rolling down his cheeks. I knelt by his chair. Pops, what is it? What's wrong? Are you in pain? He shook his head, his hand trembling as he held mine. No, Piccolina, he whispered. That was his name for me, his little one. It's just, this isn't living. This is waiting. I stormed into the kitchen where my dad and Cynthia were having coffee. He's miserable. We have to do something. We have to take him out. To the park. To his old workshop. Something. My dad's face went cold. Ava, you're being emotional. He's fine. He's safe. He's cared for. That's what matters. Safe? He's withering away in that room. And then Cynthia dropped the bomb. She looked at me, her face all pinched, and she said, Ava, perhaps it's time you started focusing on your own life. You're here every day. It's a lot. I felt like I'd been slapped. He's my grandfather. And he's our responsibility, my dad said, his voice final. We're handling it. You need to back off. Back off. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's when I noticed the new car keys on the counter. A BMU. And Cynthia was wearing a new diamond bracelet. A cold, sick feeling started to twist in my gut. I started digging. Gently. I asked about Pop's accounts. Is there enough money for everything? My dad got instantly defensive. It's tight, Ava. Very tight. You have no idea the costs involved. But we're managing. Don't you worry. But I was worrying. I was worrying a lot. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I'll never forget it. I showed up for my usual visit, and the house was quiet. Too quiet. Pops wasn't in his room. The medical equipment was gone. My heart just stopped. I found my dad in his home office, on the phone, laughing about a golf game. Where is he? My voice was a shaky whisper. He covered the phone. Ava, not now. Where is Pops? He sighed, like I was the most inconvenient person in the world. He hung up the phone. We had to make a change. This situation, it was too much for Cynthia, for the household. It wasn't working. What are you talking about? Where is he? We found him a place. A very nice facility. It's for the best. I felt the world tilt. A facility? You promised. You said we would never do that to him. Circumstances change, Ava. It was becoming a burden we simply couldn't handle. The word echoed in the silent, expensive house. Burden. My grandfather, the man who built this family, was a burden. I didn't say another word. I turned and I ran. I called every nursing home in a 50-mile radius. It took me 3 hours to find him. Shady Acres Convalescent Home. It was as bad as it sounds. The smell hit me first. Bleach and despair. The walls were a grimy beige. And there in a shared room, by a window that looked out onto a brick wall, was Pops. He was just staring out that window, a shell of the man he used to be. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. Ava, they said you knew. They said you agreed. And in that moment, I felt a part of my soul just shatter. My own father had thrown him away like trash, and told him I was okay with it. I held his hand, my own tears falling onto our clasped fingers. No, Pops. No, I didn't know. I would never agree to this. Never. He squeezed my hand, his voice so weak. I know, Piccolina. I know. I stayed with him for hours. I promised him, whispering it like a prayer, I will get you out of here. I don't know how, but I will. I promise. But time wasn't on our side. The neglect, the heartbreak, it was too much. He lasted 6 weeks in that place. 6 weeks. The call came in the middle of the night. It was the facility. Mr. Giovanni Rossi has passed away. I didn't cry. Not then. A cold, hard stone had settled in my chest where my heart used to be. I drove to Shady Acres in a trance. to identify his body, to collect his things. He had one small suitcase. At the bottom, under his clothes, was a small framed photo. A photo of him and me, sitting on the porch of his old house, laughing. He'd kept it, hidden it. That's when the tears came. Great, heaving sobs that felt like they would tear me in two. My father had a funeral for him. A big, showy affair. All his business friends were there. He gave a beautiful eulogy about what a great man his father was, how much he loved him, how much he was missed. I sat in the front row, my hands clenched in my lap, watching him perform. And all I could think was, "You liar. You threw him out. You broke his heart." And I knew, right then and there, looking at my father's perfectly composed, grieving face, this was not over. Not by a long shot. The weeks after the funeral were quiet, a horrible, empty quiet. I went back to my life, my apartment, my work, but I was just going through the motions. I was a ghost. My dad and Cynthia, they acted like nothing had happened, like they'd done their duty and now life could move on. They invited me over for dinner once. I went. I don't know why. Maybe some sick part of me hoped for an apology? A crack in the facade? But there was nothing. Just more show. The house was even more lavish. There was talk of a summer home in Michigan. Cynthia was planning a trip to Paris. And every time I looked at my dad, all I could see was Pops, staring at that brick wall. The stone in my chest grew heavier. Then about 2 months after Pops was gone, I got a letter. A thick, cream-colored envelope from a law firm I'd never heard of. Bennett and Strauss, LLC. My first thought was, is this about debt? Did Pops have debts my dad didn't tell me about? With a sinking heart, I opened it. It was a summons for the reading of the last will and testament of Giovanni Rossi. My hands were shaking. I hadn't even thought about a will. I guess I just assumed everything went to my dad. He was the only son. He had the power of attorney. It was a formality. The reading was scheduled for the following Friday at the lawyer's office in the Loop. I called my dad. "Oh, yeah, I got one too," he said, his voice casual. "Just a formality, sweetheart. Don't worry about it." Pops didn't have much left anyway. The medical bills, they were astronomical. "We'll probably just get some sentimental token. I'll handle it, he said but his tone said I. The stone in my chest turned to ice. Friday came. I put on a simple black dress. I felt like I was going to another funeral. The law office was the opposite of Shady Acres. All dark wood, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, and that hushed, expansive silence that smells like money and power. My dad and Cynthia were already there. He was in a sharp, tailored suit. She was in a designer dress. They looked like they were about to close a multi-million-dollar deal, not hear their father's last wishes. My dad gave me a tight, patronizing smile. "Ava, try not to be too emotional, okay? This is just business." I didn't say a word. I just sat in one of the heavy leather chairs, facing the large desk. A man walked in. He was older, maybe in his 70s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. This was Mr. Bennett. "Robert, Cynthia, Ava," he said, nodding to each of us. "Thank you for coming. My condolences again for your loss. Giovanni was a great man, a client and a friend for over 40 years. He sat down, opened a file, and put on a pair of reading glasses. "We are here today for the reading of the last will and testament of Giovanni Rossi, dated, let's see, 6 months ago. 6 months ago. That was right after he moved in with my dad." My breath hitched. "This document revokes all previous wills and codicils," Mr. Bennett continued, his voice dry and precise. He started with the small stuff. "To my granddaughter, Ava Marie Rossi, I leave my personal woodworking tools, my workshop contents, and the photo albums belonging to my late wife, Isabella." A wave of grief washed over me. His tools, his memories of my grandmother. It was the most precious thing he could have given me. Tears welled in my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. My dad gave a slight, impatient sigh. Mr. Bennett continued. "Now, to the matter of the estate's primary assets, which consist of the following: the property located at 1724 Maple Lane, Oak Park, Illinois, the business known as Giovanni's Fine Woodworking, including all business accounts, trademarks, and client lists, and the entirety of his investment and savings portfolios held at First Chicago Trust." He looked up over his glasses. The total value of these assets, as of last month's appraisal, is approximately $72 million. The air was sucked out of the room. $72 million. I felt dizzy. I looked at my dad. His face was a mask of stunned anticipation. He was already counting the money. Cynthia had a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with greed. 72 million. All those times he said it was tight. All those comments about the financial burden. It was all a lie. A massive, grotesque lie. Mr. Bennet cleared his throat. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. The will contains a specific clause, a conditional clause regarding this sum. He adjusted his glasses and began to read, his voice clear and unwavering. To my son, Robert Michael Rossi, I bequeath the full and total sum of my estate, all properties and assets, under one specific, non-negotiable condition. He paused, looking directly at my father. The condition is that my son, Robert, provided me with a standard of care consistent with the value of my estate in my own home for the remainder of my natural life. This care was to be funded directly from my estate, and his actions were to be guided by loyalty and familial duty, not greed. My father's face was frozen, a statue of greed. Mr. Bennet's voice grew harder, colder. However, if my son, Robert, failed in this duty, if he placed me in a long-term care facility for reasons not solely related to my medical needs, as certified by 2 independent physicians, or if he was found to have misappropriated funds from my estate for his personal use prior to my passing, then this bequest is rendered null and void. My dad shot up from his chair. What is this? What kind of nonsense is this? He was my father. I cared for him. The medical bills were— Sit down, Robert, Mr. Bennet said, his voice like steel. My dad slowly sank back into his chair, his face turning a frightening shade of red. Mr. Bennet continued reading. As per the documentation provided to this firm, which includes bank statements, receipts for personal luxury goods purchased by Robert and Cynthia Rossi during the time of my care, and the official admission records from Shady Acres Convalescent Home, it is clear that the condition has not been met. He looked up, his gaze sweeping over us. Therefore, Robert Michael Rossi is hereby disinherited. He will receive nothing from my estate, not a single dollar. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. My dad's mouth was opening and closing like a fish. Cynthia let out a small, strangled cry. You can't do this. My dad finally sputtered, his voice cracking. I'll contest this. This is elder abuse. He wasn't in his right mind. On the contrary, Mr. Bennet said calmly, we have a sworn affidavit from his primary physician at the time, and a video recording of this will signing, which clearly shows Giovanni to be of sound mind and body. He was very specific. He knew exactly what he was doing. He turned his attention to the final part of the will. In the event that my son fails to meet the condition, the entirety of my estate, all $72 million, shall pass to my granddaughter, Ava Marie Rossi, in trust until today's date, to be managed by Bennett and Strauss, with the express wish that she use it to build a life of purpose and happiness, free from the avarice that consumed her father. Time stopped. The world stopped. $72 million. It was mine. I looked at my father. The mask was gone, completely shattered. All that was left was raw, ugly, furious desperation. You, he hissed, his eyes locking on mine. They were filled with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. You did this. You poisoned him against me. I was too stunned to speak, to even move. You little bitch, Cynthia shrieked, standing up and pointing a trembling, manicured finger at me. You planned this. You turned that old man against his own son. Mr. Bennet stood up. That is enough. This meeting is over. The will is legal and binding. Eva, we will need to meet next week to begin the process of transferring the assets. My father was breathing in ragged, shallow gasps. He was staring at me, but he wasn't seeing me. He was seeing his lost fortune, his lost future, the shiny life he had sold everyone, crumbling to dust. I'll fight this, he whispered, his voice trembling with rage. I will spend every last cent I have fighting you for what is rightfully mine. And that's when the ice in my chest finally cracked. I stood up. I looked him dead in the eye. My voice, when it came out, was quiet, steady, and it carried a finality that made even Mr. Bennet pause. "No, Dad," I said. "You won't, because you don't have a cent to spend." I turned and I walked out of that office. I didn't look back. I could feel his eyes burning a hole in my back. The eyes of a man who had just lost everything. And all I could think was, this isn't justice. This is just the beginning. I didn't go home that night. I drove, for hours. Just drove, down Lakeshore Drive, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold against the dark water. The number echoed in my head, 72 million. It was an abstract concept, a number on a piece of paper. It didn't feel real. What felt real was the look on my father's face, the pure, undiluted hatred, the accusation. "You did this." But I hadn't. He had. He'd done it to himself, to Pops. The money wasn't a blessing. It was a weapon. And Pops, from beyond the grave, had handed it to me. By the time the sun was coming up, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink over Lake Michigan, the shock had worn off. In its place was a cold, clear, terrifying clarity. My father was right about one thing. He would fight. He would hire lawyers. He would drag me through the mud. He would tell anyone who would listen that I was a manipulative gold digger, that Pops was senile, that I'd coerced him. He would use every last dollar of the money he'd already stolen from Pops to try and steal the rest. And the thought of him using Pop's own money to do it, that was the final straw. The stone in my chest wasn't ice anymore. It was forged steel. I wouldn't just defend the will. I wouldn't just sit back and let him come at me. Pops didn't just give me the money. He gave me the power for revenge. And I was going to use it. My first meeting with Mr. Bennet was the following Monday. I walked into his office, a different person from the grieving granddaughter of the week before. I was calm, focused. "My father will contest the will," I said, getting straight to the point. Mr. Bennet nodded, almost certainly. "But he will lose. The will is ironclad. The video evidence is remarkably compelling. Your grandfather was very clear." "I know he'll lose," I said, "but I don't want a long public court battle. I don't want to give him a platform to smear Pop's name. I want it to be quiet and final." Mr. Bennet leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "What are you proposing?" "I want to offer him a deal," I said. "A settlement." He looked surprised. "Ava, that is highly unusual. You are under no obligation. He is entitled to nothing." "I know." I met his gaze. "But I'm not giving him the settlement out of kindness. I'm giving it to him as a trap." I laid out my plan. It was simple and brutal. We would offer my father a one-time, lump sum settlement of $1 million. A pittance compared to what he thought he deserved. But to a man facing financial ruin, a man who'd already spent a fortune he didn't have, it would be a lifeline. But the offer would come with conditions. One, he must sign a comprehensive, airtight, and public non-disclosure agreement. He would never, ever speak my grandfather's name, my name, or the terms of the will or the settlement to anyone, not to the media, not to friends, not at a country club dinner, not a word. 2, he must immediately drop any and all legal challenges to the will. 3, he must provide a full, itemized accounting of every dollar he spent from Pop's accounts during the time he held power of attorney. "He'll never agree to the third condition," Mr. Bennet said. "That's an admission of guilt." "Exactly," I said, my voice quiet. "He'll be too proud, too arrogant. He'll see the NDA as an insult and the accounting as a humiliation. He'll refuse. And when he refuses, we leak the will to the press." Mr. Bennet was silent for a long moment. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. "You are your grandfather's granddaughter." The offer was sent. As predicted, my father exploded. He called me, his voice a venomous screech on my voicemail. $1 million? Are you insane? After what you stole from me, and you want me to sign my life away? To keep quiet about your treachery? And an accounting? Go to hell, Ava. See you in court. I saved the voicemail. It was evidence of his state of mind, his greed. The next phase began. I hired a team, not just lawyers, a forensic accountant, a private investigator, the best money could buy. I gave them one instruction. I want to know everything. Every dollar he took, every lie he told. I want to know what he had for breakfast. I want to build a case so airtight, so publicly damning, that he won't just lose in court, he'll lose everything else too. The investigator, a stoic woman named Maria, came back to me in 2 weeks. Your father, she said, sliding a file across my kitchen table, is leveraged to the hilt. The house has a massive mortgage. The BMWs are leased. He took out a second mortgage to pay for Cynthia's investments, which appear to be a failed boutique and a lot of trips to Neiman Marcus. The money he took from your grandfather, it wasn't for medical bills. It was to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford. The forensic accountant's report was even more detailed. He traced 1.2 million from Pop's accounts directly to my dad's personal spending, luxury cars, jewelry, club memberships, vacations. We had him. On paper, it was embezzlement, plain and simple, but I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Criminal charges would be messy, unpredictable. I wanted a different kind of justice. I wanted him to experience the same kind of slow, humiliating ruin he'd subjected Pops to. So, I started using the one thing he cared about more than money, his reputation. I became a ghost in his life, a phantom. A source would leak a tiny, tantalizing detail to a business associate. Heard Robert's in a bit of a financial bind. Something about a contested inheritance. Another source would mention to a country club friend, I think Cynthia's new diamond bracelet came from her father-in-law's life savings. So sad. The rumors started to swirl. Whispers at the golf club. Sideways glances at charity galas. My father started to feel it. The walls closing in. He called me again, this time his voice strained, trying to be reasonable. Ava, this is getting out of hand. These rumors. People are talking. Let's sit down. Like adults. We can work this out. The will was a mistake. We both know that. We can split it. 50-50. A clean 36 million each. No more fighting. I almost laughed. The audacity, the sheer unmitigated gall. The offer of 1 million is still on the table, Dad, I said, my voice calm. With the conditions. The accounting is non-negotiable. He slammed the phone down. The pressure mounted. His business, which was built on connections and perception, started to suffer. Clients got nervous. Deals fell through. He was being shunned, and he knew it was me. He showed up at my apartment. I saw him on the security camera. His face haggard, his suit rumpled. He buzzed over and over. I didn't answer. He started pounding on the door. Ava, I know you're in there. You open this door. You're destroying me. You're destroying your family. I stood on the other side of that reinforced door, my heart pounding, but not from fear, from a cold, grim satisfaction. This was what it felt like. This was the panic, the desperation. The feeling of your world crumbling around you. This was what he did to Pops. Finally, he left, his shouts dissolving into the city noise. I leaned my head against the door, and for the first time since this began, I cried. Not tears of sadness, tears of release, of fury. The stage was set. The trap was baited. He was crumbling, but he wasn't finished yet. I knew my father. He was a cornered animal, and a cornered animal is at its most dangerous. He had one move left, one desperate, ugly move, and I was ready for it. The letter came from his lawyer a week later. It was a formal threat. If you do not agree to a 50-50 division of the estate within 72 hours, we will be filing a lawsuit not only to contest the will on grounds of undue influence, but also to publicly allege that you were emotionally abusive and neglectful towards Giovanni Rossi in his final years, and that you bear direct responsibility for his decline. I read it twice. Then I showed it to Mr. Bennett and Maria. My father wasn't just going to fight me. He was going to try and bury me. He was going to take the one thing I had left, my relationship with Pops, and he was going to poison it. He was going to tell the world that I was the villain. It was the most despicable thing he had ever done. And it was his final mistake. It's time, I said to Maria. She nodded. The package is ready. The package was everything. The forensic accountant's report, highlighting the $1.2 million in embezzled funds. The bank statements, the receipts for the cars, the jewelry, the vacations, all time-stamped during the period he was supposedly struggling to pay for Pop's astronomical medical bills. Copies of the Shady Acres admission forms, and a carefully edited but devastating transcript of his voicemail to me, screaming about what I stole, We didn't send it to a newspaper. That was too crude. We sent it to everyone who mattered in his world. We sent it to the president of his country club, to every one of his major business clients and partners, to the board of the charities he sat on, to his golfing buddies, to Cynthia's entire social circle. It was sent anonymously, from a secure server, with a simple one-line note: the truth about Robert Rossi. The bomb detonated at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning by 9:15. My phone started ringing. It was a number I didn't recognize. Then another, and another. Texts started pouring in from old family friends. Ava, is this true? My God, I'm so sorry. I turned off my phone. I turned on my laptop and went to the local business journal's website. There it was. The lead story: Oak Park executive disinherited for alleged misuse of father's funds. The article was brutal. It laid out the entire story, citing documents provided to this publication. It mentioned the conditional will, the embezzlement, shady acres. It stopped just short of libel, but the message was clear. Robert Rossi was a fraud, a man who had thrown his own father away for a BMW and a diamond bracelet. I sat there, in the silence of my apartment, and I watched his world burn. Maria called me on a secure line. It's done. The fallout is immediate. He's been asked to resign from the country club board. 3 major clients have already terminated their contracts. His line of credit at the bank has been frozen. It was over. In a single morning, I had taken from him the only thing he had left after losing the money: his name. About an hour later, my doorman buzzed. Miss Rossi? There's a gentleman here to see you. A Mr. Rossi. He's insistent. He seems distraught. I took a deep breath. It's okay, Carlos. You can let him up. I unlocked my door and left it slightly ajar. I stood in the middle of my living room and I waited. I heard the elevator ding, heard his uneven footsteps on the hallway carpet. The door pushed open. He looked destroyed. His suit was the same one he'd worn to the will reading, but now it looked like he'd slept in it. His eyes were bloodshot and hollow. His hair was a mess. He was just a shell. He stood in my doorway, swaying slightly, and looked at me. The hatred was gone, replaced by a bottomless, stunned defeat. Why? He whispered, his voice raspy and broken. Ava, why would you do this? I'm your father. Those words. After everything. I'm your father. The last of the steel in my heart solidified. There was no going back. No, I said, my voice quiet and steady in the morning quiet. You stopped being my father the day you looked at Pops and saw a burden instead of a person. You stopped being my father the day you lied to him and told him I agreed to throw him away. He flinched as if I'd struck him. You took his money. I continued, the words falling like stones. You took his home. You took his dignity. And you were going to take my name. You were going to tell the world that I hurt him. You were going to spit on his memory to get what you wanted. Tears started to stream down his face. They weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. I was desperate. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Cynthia, the lifestyle. I had to maintain appearances. You didn't have to, I said. You chose to. You chose to steal from your dying father. You chose to lie. You chose to try and destroy me. Every step of the way, you made a choice. He sank to his knees right there in my doorway. It was a pathetic, dramatic gesture. Ava, please, please. You've won. You have everything. Just call off the dogs. Make it stop. My business, my friends, they're all gone. I looked down at him, this broken man kneeling on my floor, and I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just a vast empty silence. I'm not doing anything else, Dad, I said. I didn't call your clients. I didn't talk to the country club. I just showed them the truth. You did the rest yourself. I walked over to my desk, picked up a single piece of paper, and walked back to him. I held it out. It was a cashier's check for $1 million, made out to Robert M. Rossi. His eyes widened, fixating on the number. A flicker of the old greed, quickly extinguished by confusion. The offer still stands, I said. Take it. Sign the NDA. Agree to the accounting. This check is yours. It's more than you gave Pops. It's more than you deserve. It's enough to start over, somewhere else. He looked from the check to my face, his mind reeling. This was his way out. A humiliating, pitiful way out, but a way out nonetheless. He reached a trembling hand up and took the check. In that moment, as his fingers closed around the paper, I knew I had won. Not because I was giving him money, but because he was taking it. He was accepting his defeat. He was admitting that his reputation, his pride, his entire sense of self was worth exactly $1 million. He got to his feet, clutching the check like a life raft, unable to look me in the eye. "The documents will be delivered to Mr. Bennett by the end of the day," I said. "Don't be late." He nodded, a broken, mechanical gesture, and turned without another word. He shuffled out of my apartment and down the hall. I listened to the elevator doors close behind him. And then, it was over. The silence in my apartment was different this time. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The city Pops had come to as a young man with nothing. The city where he built a life, a family, a legacy. He hadn't just given me the money. He had given me the strength to protect that legacy, to defend our truth. I used his money to buy back our family home from the estate. I moved in. I restored his workshop exactly as it was. The smell of sawdust and varnish welcomed me home. I didn't start a foundation. I didn't make a big public show of it. I just lived. I found purpose in the quiet things. I used a small part of the money to fund a nonprofit that provides in-home care for seniors, ensuring they never have to face a place like Shady Acres. I heard through the grapevine that my dad and Cynthia moved to Arizona. The last $1 million didn't last long. Cynthia left him a year later. He lives in a small condo now alone, a ghost of the man he pretended to be. I don't hate him anymore. Hate is a fire, and it burns the one who carries it. I just feel nothing, and in that nothingness, I found my freedom. Pops didn't just get revenge for me. He set me free. He taught me that the strongest foundations aren't made of money or lies. They're made of love and integrity and the quiet, unshakable truth of a promise kept. This story was brought to you by Silent Revenge. Remember, sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't a loud explosion, but the quiet peace you build from the ashes they left behind. Walk away, build your life, and let your happiness be the final, silent word.